Now, am I going to be able to get you to do a business plan? I can try, but I'm not going to waste my time unless you're a total psychopath, mental. We spunk all our money on that. I'm not talking like a bitter old fart. Composers aren't that open about this, but nabbing one of those clock up all of these hours of performance revenue. And there is no form of performance revenue easier to collect than bricks and mortar. If you are a hugely successful composer and think I'm talking a bunch of bullshit, also put that in the video comments. But what most composers realise about 15 years into their career is what you want is a So it's been a while since I've done a monologue, and I realised as the spectre of schools breaking up looms for us parents, that this marks, for many of us, another year that has passed. Us parents are going to be pretty much tied up becoming Uber services for our children, taking them away, nursing their sunburns. Yes, you can get sunburned in Scotland. But it also brings forth a realisation that many of you will be graduating and coming out into the workplace, the marketplace, if you will. So I thought I'd impart onto you some common misconceptions I see people having about creating a life in music as a business, the business of one that is you. Some of these misconceptions are actually by those who are successful in the industry. They help perpetuate possibly ideas that were assertions that would have been correct 10, 20 years ago maybe, but have long since changed. What has never existed, and to my knowledge will never exist, is this idea of a democratic open marketplace. The most asked question I have is, how do I find work? How do I get people to use my music on their productions? Where do I go? As if there is a place, a queue, like we're labourers. It simply doesn't work like that. And you have graduated, that means you have gained a degree of knowledge towards part of your job. Part of that job being a composer, a producer, an engineer. What you haven't been prepared for is the most important part of your job. Certainly my job as a composer is that of HOD, head of department. That takes up 95% of my time, composing 5%, if that. A director will hire you for that 5%. The producer is hiring you for the rest. And guess who's paying your wages? It isn't the director. The producer is expecting you to take on a huge amount of responsibility. And in so doing, they need reassurance. That reassurance comes from you being experienced, you having worked with a number of people who can write you up a stunning report. And that, my friends, is the aspect of the job that really does require that somewhat cliched 10,000 hours. It's about chipping away at various different projects, slowly being involved more and more until you can claim a degree of ownership of that responsibility. And that's before all of the plaudits and awards and stuff like that happen. I think the other thing that is absolutely vital to think about as your midterm plan is to develop who you are artistically, to develop your voice, to submerge yourself in truly excellent music and create something that fosters its own demand. Of all the posts I've made on social media recently, I'd say that this one has caused the most consternation. It was as if I was trying to put one of those inspirational business things that so many people put up on social media. It wasn't intended as that, but I failed to contextualize that. It was indeed just as a mark of admiration for this guy, Amar, excuse me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, sir, Bose, who is an American of immigrant Bengali stock who created the Bose Corporation. But it is something I truly believe in. I think that being tenacious, which I've always believed to be one of the key facets to success, is that much easier if what you're doing is something that you believe strongly in if you look forward to Mondays, not Fridays. I think it's a lot easier to pick yourself up and brush yourself off if you are satisfying that inner need in you. And it's not an inner need for success. It's not an inner need for awards. It's what makes you satisfied creatively. Copying composers who are 10, 15 years ahead of you means you'll always be 10, 15 years behind them, not just compositionally, but also just experientially. I also think, very much so, that this orchestral zeitgeist, I think, has probably run its course, certainly in the sense of these huge symphonic scores over cooking programs. I'll come back to those in a minute. I think what I'm trying to say is it basically is a collaboration. And when it comes to collaborating, it's about a relationship between people or peoples. We live in an age when we feel everything is accessible online. Surely I can just put some music up and then people can use it. Well, that exists. It's called library music. But if you want to write commissioned music, you have to find the commissioners, the producers, the directors. And whilst you're working on your 10,000 hours, working on what you are musically, I think you also have to run a business, one that pays the bills. Now, am I going to be able to get you to do a business plan? I can try, but I'm not going to waste my time. But again, I think there are misconceptions about how we actually make money. Beware of impossible hierarchies. By these, I mean fields of enterprise where the winner pretty much takes all. You know, look at pop. You've got Taylor Swift, who is so far ahead of everyone else. Halfway down the hierarchy, you're talking about probably 12 artists. The distribution of wealth is poor. So beware of those aims unless you're a total psychopath, because the people who scale these impossible hierarchies are mental. A different league of committed ambition, tenacity. And when I say mental, I mean to a point where you almost dehumanize yourself, where you objectify yourself and your time on this planet. So it may come as a surprise to you that getting work that levers you into feature films, the thing that we all want to do, you know, computer games, far bigger industry, they want to be like films. So it's considered the high art form. It's one of the worst hierarchies. I can safely say, of my earnings as a composer over the last 25 years, I would say, where films are concerned, it amounts probably to about 3%. There's very little up front. They're always package deals, which basically means they roll in the orchestras and stuff, and because we love working with orchestras, we spunk all our money on that. But also, they're incredibly difficult to sell. People don't really go to the cinema unless it's for Barbieheimer these days. I'm not talking like a bitter old fart. It's just the fact. So, I mean, I did a fantastic film called Black Death with Sean Bean. It was something that Ridley Scott absolutely loved. It played in 4 cinemas for 2 weeks. The amount of performance royalties you get from that is literally next to nothing. In America, the cinemas aren't licensed, so they don't pay out performance royalties. So what you would need to earn a really good living out of films is that very top tier of global phenomena, which then go on to all of the TV channels and you get the performance income from that. But again, the hierarchy is so slim. TV, on the other hand, particularly in this country, terrestrial TV is a shallower hierarchy. The very top end of what you're going to earn is much more achievable, much more believable. And I guess this is where we're venturing into, for some reason, an area where composers aren't that open about this. The idea that film, whilst being the kind of the chief art form, is very much the stingiest master. I guess it's simply a matter of how many people are queuing outside the door to get into film. But what most composers realise about 15 years into their career is what you want is a franchise. Now, franchises are TV series, seasons that go time and time and time again, repeat as much as humanly possible, and that require a lot of score. And you may be surprised to hear that unless it's something like Downton or Bridgerton that sells internationally, the best franchises I know, according to my friends, that you need to nab are cooking programs, the ones that play every day, the ones that hype up burning a souffle like it's the end of the world. This is not the fashionable end of TV. This is probably not why you wanted to get into media composition, but nabbing one of those can make all of the difference. There was a period maybe 10, 15 years ago where nabbing a quiz show was the ultimate goal. And again, it was when quiz shows suddenly became scored through Millionaire, Weakest Link. And it works for drama franchises too. It's for two reasons. One, it creates a massive passive income. And that is an income that flows in regardless of the hours that you're putting in. But also, when these things get recommissioned, often you'll get another commissioning fee. The amount of work you have to do for these commissions will become an order of magnitude less. So it basically means by being a franchise holder or a holder of a score for a franchise basically means that you can do a minimal amount of work whilst taking on other franchises. Indeed, often you will simply provide, certainly for factual entertainment, these franchises, whether it be natural history or reality TV, you'll provide a library of materials for them to work with, which means often they won't even call on you to write more stuff. I did a thing called 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps, which was about a day's work and haunted me over, I think, close to 100, maybe 100 plus episodes over many years. Fresh meat, 4 seasons. I found myself maybe doing 1 or 2 pieces of new music per season. But the most extraordinary franchise that I've landed and just finished was a thing called Inside Number 9, where I actually didn't feel any of the benefits of it being a franchise because it was an anthology series and every single episode was different and required a totally clean slate. So whilst I was underwriting working on this franchise because it's the BBC and doesn't pay very well, I wasn't able to just churn out the cues like you would do on another franchise. So you've graduated. What I would recommend to most composers is to befriend other composers. I've met thousands of composers, and of all the successful ones, I'm yet to have a meeting where they don't mention another composer's name, whether it be Hans Zimmer and Stanley Myers, or Harry Gregson and Hans Zimmer, or myself and Harry Gregson Williams. So scraping away at that 10,000 hours, whether that be assisting people, ghosting people, or indeed doing ancillary jobs like orchestration and conducting and copying for other composers, is something that will be necessary for you to build up trust within the industry. Developing your voice is absolutely crucial, and I think will really keep you going from a psychological point of view. But then, when it comes to finding that work that will give you a financial grounding, simply look at the unfashionable areas within the business. Nailing a daytime TV franchise, befriending a director who has the choice between using some library music and maybe using your music, I would do that hand over foot. And if you want a real tip, certainly from a composer based in the UK, the highest potential earner you can possibly nab is a public information film. No joke. I nailed one of them and bought a house with the performance revenue. Basically, there's a weird thing in this country where if they can't sell advertising space on channels, they have to put a public information film in. So suddenly you can just clock up all of these hours and hours of performance revenue. A lot of people think the way to an easy buck is advertising and composing music for adverts. If people are telling you that, they stuck their heads up their own arses in the 1990s and haven't removed them because they like the smell. I wouldn't go anywhere near advertising with a barge pole. And again, this is not bitter me, it's impossibly competitive and improbably exploitative. Now, it's funny, I mean, if I was to name where the biggest potential to earn as a composer is, and I would argue the most affluent composer in the United Kingdom today is, of course, theatre. I believe Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, not the film, has made more than E.T. And there is no form of performance revenue easier to collect than bricks and mortar, a building that's putting on your music 8 times a week. But again, a very slender hierarchy. You will find, as you get to know composers, that as much of their wealth will come from property investment, diversification, and wise business decisions. Being a good head of department, being a good composer, doesn't necessarily guarantee a successful business. So apologies if this monologue is full of contradictions, but you need to find that balance of trying to create artistic demand for yourself whilst also trying to run a business, whilst also trying to service a director and a producer who often want entirely different things. I'm pleased to say that we are this close to setting up a discourse, which is not Discord, it's discourse. It's basically a chat stroke messaging area in Crow Hill. So do sign up to the membership of Crow Hill if you want to be a part of that. And I would love to be able to do these monologues and then hit discourse to answer questions about them. In the interim, why don't you put some questions in the comments down below, and again I'll try and get back to you on that. On Thursday this week we're going to be doing a podcast stroke kind of network show, which again I'm sure will have a lot of questions coming up. So if you've got any questions for that, to do with this video or anything else, please stick them in the video comments down below. And I believe we've got a local composer coming to visit who won one of the composer challenges, which is really exciting. Thanks for listening to my waffling. Again, I try to be positive, but also realistic. I diversified myself into the world of sample recording and sample libraries, which enables me to not be hyper competitive within the composing marketplace, which has enabled me to be fairly brutally honest on this vlog, and I hope that does you a service. If you are a hugely successful composer and think I'm talking a bunch of bullshit, also put that in the video comments. I really do welcome that kind of discourse in a world where it's illegal to disagree. Do subscribe. Our channel really relies on it, and it's one of the few things that you can do for us that really helps us, and one of those always much appreciated. Ding the bell to be notified the next time we put a video up, and see you very soon.